pretty well, obviously. Oh, where are you guys from?
Michigan.
Oh, nice. We have a guy working in the winery from Michigan, scrawny little dude who's
He's smart being here.
What's that?
He's smart being here.
Oh, who's unbelievably hard worker. One of these scrappy little city guys. He's amazing.
We have some other people from Virginia, I think, so not everybody knows that.
So around here, you all know this to some extent, but it's kind of fun to talk about. Anybody see this map? Someday we'll have like PowerPoint and all that stuff. We can put a screen up on the boxes there.
This is much cuter.
What's that?
This is much cuter.
Okay, good. It's getting a little archaic, but
I like it.
so this is like a kind of poor topographical map of the neighborhood. And around here it's all about, in terms of temperature variations, how the fog gets from the coast into where your vineyard is. So if you think about Sonoma County in general, right, you start down here in Marin. It's kind of open and windswept in the southern area, right? And when you get north of the Russian River, I'll start north, is actually easier. There's a singular ridge all the way from the Russian River to the Gualala River, which is the Mendocino border. You might know that. And that's called Seaview Ridge. It's anywhere from 1,400 to 2,100 feet of elevation. And it's a pretty effective block of the fog getting into the northern Russian River area. Then you have a break for the river itself, which is down in the middle of this map. Then the ridge actually reforms, okay, and we call that Fitzpatrick Ridge or various names, but it reforms to about 11 to 1,400 feet, but then it breaks down completely around the around Bodega Highway. It's what we call the Petaluma Wind Gap. So I always like to talk about as a bike ride. If you start here, so taking a bike ride, we're at about 300 feet of elevation here, 250. You drop down to about 40 feet in Grayton, maybe 100 feet. As you go west, you get about 1,000 feet on Stoats Ridge at the very top of Stoats, which is where our Zinfandel is. We have a little bit of Chardonnay up there as well. You drop down to about 500 in Occidental. You hit about 1,400 again on the top of Coleman Valley Road, and then you drop like a rock to the coast. But if you go south a bit to Bodega Highway, you never go over about 250 feet. So all the fog for the whole Russian River comes from the southwest to the northeast, kind of in and out like that. So in reality, what it comes down to is the further south and the further west you get in the Appalachian, the colder it gets. The other issue is elevation. So there's three things. How far are you from the coast, obviously, or maybe a few more than that. What's between you and the coast, even more importantly, because that's what blocks the fog. Elevation is really important because the fog comes in low and then backs up the hills. So the higher you are around here, unlike a mountain environment, the higher you are, the warmer it gets. And then the other thing, of course, are you facing the water or away from the water? So if you think of Freestone Hill, which is the last one, or the middle one we're going to taste today, Freestone Hill's right over here, right by the town of Freestone, looking right out at Bodega Bay. And just 2 miles away, you can be at Marty's vineyard, what we call Emerald Ridge, and Emerald Ridge will pick a month earlier, given the same crop, than Freestone, only 2 miles away, because one's facing the ocean, one's facing away. One's in the valley side, one's in the coastal side. So you get this wonderful variation of climate in this neighborhood. Then the other thing that a lot of winemakers don't talk about as much in this neighborhood is soil variations. And in general, it's all gold. Is this like too much geological stuff? This is what I love about, I'm kind of a climber and I love whatever. I love topographical maps. And does anybody have Hugh Johnson's World Atlas of Wine? If you love one, of course, reach out. Because I have the 1960s, this Rich Solanka, who I was in graduate school. Well, he was in graduate school at Berkeley when I was a bum at Berkeley, and he's actually gainfully employed now as a research, well, not anymore research chemist, big executive with a PhD in chemistry, and I'm just making wine. So Rich and I used to, he had Cartier, now I'm really going back, Cartier loans, and I was working in the lab, and we would go spend our money on Burgundies in Piedmont and drink like 5 Burgundies a night, and he kept going in chemistry, and I ended up dropping out and going back to school in Davis. So that's the way it goes. Anyway, if you look at Hugh Johnson's Atlas of Wine, what's so cool about it is it's this big like coffee table sized book, and it's got the topo maps of the area. So you look at Le Bois de Courton, the woods of Courton in Burgundy, and you really get a feel for that little circular nub of a hill and which way that vineyard faces. And that's kind of what's fun about what we do here. So we get vineyards starting in Freestone, so looking out towards the coast. That's the second vineyard we're going to taste. The very first we're going to taste actually is a vineyard called Foxden. And Foxden's right on the top of Stoats Ridge. Only a couple miles from Freestone, not even a couple, probably 1 mile as the crow flies. It's actually a little warmer, but funny enough, it always gets picked just as late because of that third or fourth variable, which is the soil. So almost all the soil around here is what's called Gold Ridge Sandy Loam. And all Gold Ridge Sandy Loam is, this whole area used to be an ancient seabed, right? So then with plate tectonics, it all gets lifted up. So if you go to the top of the hills around here, it's just like flat out, like sea sand. So Morelli Lane Pinot Noir, or Morelli Lane Zinfandel at the end of the year, just looks like dust. It just total, this like white yellow. So the topsoil is this real sandy, sandy material. Then anywhere from 2 to 6 feet down, depending on where you are, you have an impermeable either clay layer or sandstone layer. And clay, of course, the sand holds very, very little water. The clay holds a ton of water, obviously. So once the roots of these vines get down into that clay, you pretty much, you pretty much never have to water. So one of the nice things around here. So what kind of distinguishes Foxden is they just sand like all the way down. So there's very low nutrient, very low nitrogen in the soil. It's actually very low potassium. You need potassium to ripen grapes. And you're always careful about how much you want to fertilize. So you want healthy vines, but you don't want vigorous vines because it's all about balancing, right, the vine growth with the berry ripening. And if you think of the way vines ripen at the end of the season, and the reason they ripen at the end of the season is they think they're going to die, right? So I'm going to die, I got to ripen seeds, so I reproduce. So what happens is the quicker a vineyard dries out, or the more stressed it is, to some extent. Obviously, there's a line here, and there's a lot we don't know, or there's too much to know to pretend you know very much in reality. In the more stressed places, they convert from growing green leaves to ripening grapes sooner. Okay, so in a place on a real steep hillside with real light soil, it'll start trying to ripen the grapes, meaning the seeds are getting brown, right? The whole idea of grapes ripening is to ripen the seeds so they're mature seeds for reproduction. So ripening the seeds, ripening the skins get thicker, they get chewier with Pinot Noir, they give up their color a little bit easier. And it's that time between veraison and harvest, the time they start to turn red to the time you actually pick them, that really determines in many ways the quality of the grapes you're going to end up harvesting. When you get up to Foxden, even though it's slightly warmer, that sandy soil makes everything slow down a little bit. They start to ripen earlier, but we pick them really late, so you get this really nicely developed tannin. The other thing that happens about that vineyard, and most of the vineyards out here, is because you have these big swings, right? You know, around here, obviously, in a hot day, it's 85, 90, even higher in terms of temperature, but it's usually below 55 or even 50 in the night times. And we talk about grape metabolism, right? And during the day, you're making sugar. It's just basic photosynthesis. You know, you need oxygen, and you're converting, or CO2 is converted to oxygen, and you're making sugar in the meantime. But the night cycle of photosynthesis is actually respiration. And the night cycle takes acidity, actually malic acid in the grapes are respired, and you lose acidity at night. So the colder it is at night, the more acid you retain in your grapes. So the beauty of Russian River, and particularly Green Valley, colder areas, is you get a long time on the vines, but you still have high acid grapes, and hopefully in a great year, low sugar and lower alcohol as well, which is what we like to drink. Any questions? I'm talking so fast, I don't even know where I'm going. Okay, so I'm going to give you one more physiological thing, then we're going to taste the wines and talk about the specific vineyards a little bit. If you think of the way grape, we have lots of like write-ups on this. If you like this sort of BS, I got a million little pieces. If you think of the way grapes grow in a given season, there's kind of 3 stages. The first stage, okay, is from bud break until bloom. Okay, the buds break for us sometime, usually in March, depending on the year. You know, February in the warmest places to March, and then bloom is usually around Memorial Day. And during that period, it's all just green growth. You're just saying literally in a warm day in May, a vine shoot will grow an inch a day, literally an inch a day once the ground starts to warm up. Then the second phase is when you have bloom and set, and you all heard the term set. So bloom is when you have flowers. Set are the percentage of the flowers that turn into grapes, or shatter is the percentage of the flowers that don't become grapes. So that period, which is usually 1 to 3 weeks, usually around Memorial Day or so, a little later in the cooler areas, is crucial to the size of your crop in a given year. Okay? And then from that period to what we call veraison is just kind of this balanced growth where the vines are still growing and the berries are getting a little bit fatter. Okay, that's the second period. And then the third is when the grapes start turning color. Okay, when they start turning color, they're probably about 14 degrees Brix, 14% sugar. The seeds start to get brown. They don't really get any bigger at that point. And you're converting at that point to ripening metabolism. That period from veraison to harvest is what we watch very, very closely. So you're about to taste the 09s, and the reason I'm pontificating about this, and the fact that I can't help myself, is that it has a lot to do with how great I think, and pretty much everybody thinks the 09s are. So 09 is the third of 3 drought years. You all know that, right? We had 07, 08, 09, 3 drought years. You know the last 3 drought years we had in a row in California? I remember that because they were the first wines I was drinking. 76, 78, 79, and 80. Is that right? Yeah, okay. And the 77s and 78s were phenomenal, as you might recall. The first California.
78 infidel vacation and 29 bricks.
Well, see, does it. That's because it crapped out on it. So drought years have the potential to be really great because dry ground is warm ground. Warm ground promotes early bud break. So 09 was early bud break, right? And it was kind of warm and kind of nice throughout the spring. So it had a lot of early growth. Really nice set weather, but it was a pretty low. There's two, I'm backtracking just a little bit, but there are 2 elements of yield, and yield is just how many tons per acre you get. You know, one is just how many buds you leave out, but that's, you know, pretty fixed. That's what we do as growers. But one is what we call fruitfulness, and that's how much potential there is on a cluster. So the size of the clusters, the number of berries and the number of flowers on a cluster, were all fixed a year before this bloom, when those little buds that are now pushed were forming a year ago during bloom a year ago. So if you all remember 2008, it was a really bad bloom, there was a really bad frost, so the fruitfulness in 09 was pretty low, but the set weather in 09 was pretty good. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Then we had a pretty cool even summer. And then what made 09 really unique was a really exceptionally long time from veraison to harvest, because it was an early veraison because of the early bud break, and then it got really cool, not particularly foggy, but cool from August, which is when we usually start veraison, through the middle to end of September is when we usually pick our pinots. So there's a lot of color, a lot of tannin, but really developed really soft tannins, really nice acidity in the 09. So it's that kind of long ripening period, like we had in 11 for the stuff that came in before the rains, where you have this long ripening and therefore really nicely developed color and flavor in the wine. So why don't we do this? Let's just smell the 3 Pinots and taste the Pinots, and then we'll talk about the specific vineyards because I'm talking too much before you get the taste. It's just wrong to do that. And the first